to make sure I recognize everyone the best I can. This is a special town council meeting of Monday, November 30th, 2020 at 7 p.m., which was held immediately following the public hearing at 6:30 p.m. This is a remote participation meeting. Calling this meeting to order pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 38, section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the town council is being conducted via remote participation only. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in this order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching Southbridge Cable Access Channel 192 and by the remote information noted below in this agenda. We'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website at www.ci.southbridge.ma.us as soon as we're able to. A roll call vote is required for all votes taken under this order. Call this meeting to order. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this or not, but we'll do my best. I guess I'm not going to be able to do that, but everybody would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll have a flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Counselor Adams.
Present.
Counselor Catrona.
Present.
Counselor Daniel.
Present.
Counselor Dow.
Present.
Counselor Govan.
Present.
Counselor Lazo.
Present.
Counselor Marchetti.
Present.
Counselor Ryan.
Present.
And Counselor Steves.
Present.
All members present. Consider and accept the special town council meeting minutes of October 19th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay. Any errors, corrections, or omissions on that? Hearing none. Roll call.
Counselor Catrona.
Yes.
Harry.
Yes. Counselor Daniel.
Yes.
Chair. Council Jack,
Yes, go ahead, Council Don.
I came a little late and he say excuse Dow, but I came a little late at that time.
Yeah, he was there.
Okay.
I'll make the
Thank
update.
Okay.
Counselor Dow.
Yes.
Counselor Jovan.
Yes.
Counselor Lazo.
Yes.
Counselor Marchetti.
Yes.
Counselor Ryan.
Council Ryan? I think we lost her.
Oh, I think so too. Counselor Steves.
Yes.
And Counselor Adams.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Item 5, vote to ratify the contract for the superstructure repair of Mill Street Bridge over the Quinnebog River to R. Bates and Sons for a total amount of $38,000 to be funded from Chapter 90 funds. Is there a motion?
Oh. Second.
Motion by Councilor Lazo, second by Councilor Steves. DPW Subcommittee, Councilor Marchetti.
Thank you. Yes, we passed this unanimously to send to the council at the November 23rd meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? Councilor Catrona?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the town manager or the DPW director. I'm certainly not opposed for this this evening, and I spoke out at the DPW subcommittee meeting. Heather, have you been able to obtain the information that I requested in reference to the weight limit on this bridge?
Heather?
Yep, I we'll give you an update on that. I was able to reach out to the engineer, and the engineer said that the design that we have will restore the restrictions to what it was originally posted at. Currently, there is not a posted sign down there, but it was originally does have posted restrictions, which were noted based on the original design of the bridge. So we should have no problem of just having the same posting that it was originally designed for.
So there'll be no change, correct?
No change.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments? Council Dow?
Thank you, Chair. Heather, you think we should search and see what the original limit and put a sign like this? We don't increase the weight by fixing it temporary as well to make sure it's safe to big truck cross on it and not the limit?
I would assume that before the state allows us to reopen the bridge, they're going to make sure that we put that posted sign back up. So we will get a signage for that, the standard posted bridge sign
Thank you.
that we have. And I have the limits, so it's just a question of getting the sign and getting it installed.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair,
Hold on, Council Adams?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment to the town manager and the DPW director. I appreciate you guys reaching out to the senator and representative to get them over there to take a look at this in the future as far as a fix instead of a temporary fix. And some of these businesses obviously are this bridge being temporarily fixed for the time being. But I just wanted to send a thank you to both of them for their due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Ryan?
sorry, I just wanted to let you know I'm having internet issues, I guess. I had to call in.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all having issues with this weather, so it's good. Hopefully we can power through this meeting. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
Counselor Dow,
Yes.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steve,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
and Counselor Catrona.
Yes.
Motion carries. Heather, do you know when they're going to start on that now? With that approval?
Well, we'll still have to get their bonds that they need to submit, but as soon as we get the contract so that we can ratify it, the town manager can sign it once their bonds are submitted and they submit the signed contract. They told me they wanted to get it done as quick as possible to get as good weather. So as soon as I notify them tomorrow, I'm sure they'll be pulling those together and hopefully we'll see them before Christmas.
Okay, thank you. Item 6, vote to approve the 2020-2021 winter equipment hire for snow plowing and snow removal as listed in the summary table of bids received. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
We'll go Council
Second.
Lazo and Council Dow. Council Marquetti?
Yes, the DPW subcommittee voted unanimously to send this up to council for further action. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Are there any other additional information that you need to provide?
Nope, I think it's pretty cut and dry. We had 2 bids submitted. We'll have 6 pieces of equipment potentially available to us in these snowstorm by the contractors. I would still take more, and I guess that would be the only message that I would put out there is that if we get any more bids in, we would bring them to you for ratification.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Dow,
Yes.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
Counselor Catrona,
Yes.
and Counselor Daniel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item 7, vote to approve the alternate side parking and snow emergency routes for the winter 2020, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
So
Second.
moved.
Okay. Motion by Council Lazo, seconded by Council Steves. Council Marquetti?
Again, the DPW subcommittee voted unanimously to send this to the town council for further action. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussion? DPW Director, anything further to add?
Yes, I would just like to point out that per the recommendation, we actually are eliminating 2 streets from the snow emergency routes. They will be Cross and Pine. After discussing with my snowplow drivers in-house, they recommended that those streets could be eliminated, assisting in our parking. So there'll be alternate side parking streets just like everywhere else in town. And I would remind everybody that alternate side parking starts tomorrow. So I know that the police usually give courtesy tickets for the first week, but I would implore everybody to start getting in the habit of alternate side parking all day long and all evening long. It changes side at 7 o'clock at night. So please pay attention. We will be posting the alternate side parking up on the website tomorrow for anybody that has any questions. Feel free to call the office to get any clarity, but it is the way that we can keep the plows moving, the traffic moving, everything moving over the winter, including the emergency personnel. When we do get snow, it is important that we have alternate side parking in effect all the time in our community.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any questions? Council Marquetti?
The only thing I would ask is that residents who live at the high rise on Mechanic Street, they have a pretty hard time trying to find a place to park down there because the Sacred Heart parking lot has been eliminated for them where they used to park. They all used to park over there, or it hasn't been eliminated, but I think the guy wants $100 a parking spot. So the residents at the high rise are having a hard time finding a place to park. And if we could figure out somewhere for them to park, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan.
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
Counselor Catrona,
Yes.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
and Counselor Dow.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Heather. Have a good night. Stay safe. Item 8, we'll now have the overview by the Board of Assessors on the tax classification rate by Wilfred Canoyer, Principal Assessor. Will, welcome back.
Thank you very much. You've already made me the presenter, so I'm gonna, give me a second while I bring this up. Oh, I'm sorry, could you resend me the invitation to be the presenter and share my screen? I'm getting a message. It says to share your screen, ask the organizer. Okay.
No, they didn't bring that. What is that?
Hold on. Yep. Hold on 1 second. Thought we had it all set, but evidently I didn't.
It's when here it is. I have it now.
Okay.
Bear with me just a moment. And I'm going to move this over here. Put that there. Okay. Thank you very, very much. All right, so on behalf of the Board of Assessors, myself, Rand Biscay, and Diane Kokoska, we're going to be discussing the tax rate and the tax collects, the options for fiscal year 2021. You've already received detailed information in your packet, but this is for the public and it expands upon what you've already received. Beg your pardon? So purposes of classification and the options. So Mass General Law allows a shift in the tax burden between classes of property that we already talked about. Classification does not determine for the tax rate for the town. Basically, we'll go over it in detail, but the tax rate is completely determined by the tax levy divided by the town value. It doesn't determine how much money can be raised. Prop 2.5 and Mass General Law determines that, and it doesn't determine how much money will be raised. That is simply total all the appropriations that were voted during the year less any other revenue sources. The things we'll be going over tonight are our new growth, revaluation, recertification, basically how we come up with the values, what the values are and the total town value, what the tax levy and the tax rate is, the Prop 2.5 items like the levy limit, levy capacity, the various options that we have like the residential exemption and the classification factor. We'll talk a little bit about what a tax shift would mean, give some examples, and ultimately, how do we compare to our neighbors around us? So the new growth, what is it? It's, again, new construction, buildings, additions, renovations, subdivisions, condo conversions, business equipment, business equipment. In this particular year, we have a couple of really things that kind of dominated. We have a bunch of, particularly on Dresser Hill Road and the town solar facilities. There's been a big increase in solar valuation on both the land and the equipment. So how does it affect property dollars, property taxes? It brings in additional tax dollars and lessens the effect of current taxpayers. How does it affect the levy limit? It basically increases the amount of property tax that can be raised under the constraints of Prop 2.5. So for 2021, we have an additional $22,845,000 in new growth value, which allows the town to bring in additional $145,037. As you can see, the residential class brought in 19.2% of the new growth, and the vast majority of it has come from the CIP class. I'm sorry, Councilor Jovan, I can't really see who mic is on. Would you ask whoever that is to mute it? It's kind of bouncing back a lot. Okay, thank you. So this is graphically what the new growth is. And again, the 19.2% in the lower left corner quarter is the residential. The big majority of it came from the personal, commercial, CIP, commercial, industrial, personal property classes. So the total town value this year is $1,193,000. It's an increase of 6% over last year. And last year, you can see here it is, 78.5% of it is residential. The remainder is the CIP classes. This chart right here shows you the percentage of residential to CIP classes. So in 2008, the residential class bore 83% of the tax levy. That went down a little bit to about 79, 78 in 2010, and it's been relatively stable. It bumped up a little bit in the last couple of years, but it's been relatively stable. Revaluation, recertification. Just like to go over how we get the values. Again, we have to do a recertification every 5 years. The last one we did was last year in 2020. Up until last year, the Department of Revenue required it every 3 years. But in the Municipal Modernization Act, they've shifted to a 5-year schedule. So what that means is they come in and audit every year, every 5 years. But every year you still have to meet the same standards. So in evaluation, we update our values every year based on those standards. As I mentioned earlier, we have to come to full and fair cash value as of January 1, 2020. That's a year ago for this year's fiscal values. It's based on comparable arm's length sales from the prior year. And what that really ensures is everybody's taxes are based on their proportional share of town value. So whatever your property is valued at as a percentage of that 1 billion that I mentioned earlier, that's the percentages of the property taxes you pay. And these proportions change every year. And some years single families get hot. And then a couple of years later, condominiums will get really, really hot. And then they become too hot, and people have paid too much, and then they either stagnate or they start decreasing. Apartment buildings in the end of a market cycle are really, really hot, but they're the first to fall when property values fall. So how do people say, I haven't seen you? How do you know what's in my property? What's it like? So this is the various methods that are required by the state and that we utilize. First is a cyclical inspection program. The state mandates that we visit every property at least once every, it used to be 9 years, they changed it, it's now once every 10 years. So for 6,000 approximately properties that we have, we're out there, we're looking at about 600 properties a year, and we have to in order to meet the state standards. Sales review, properties that sell, I go out and inspect, or either at the time of the sale or sometime during the year. Anyone who takes out a building permit, we go out there and we update the property based on what was added or subtracted or changed or whatnot. The recertification, revaluation, field review. In the revaluation year, the state requires that we do a drive-by inspection of 50% of the residential properties, 25 to 50%, it varies. And to do that, and it's a really accelerated period. You have to do it over a 6-8 week period. That's one of the reasons we have a vendor to assist us. Their appraisers go out, look at our properties as well. The annual income and expense questionnaires, we mail these out every year to all income producing properties, all commercial, industrial, apartment buildings. We ask them, what are your rents? How many units do you have? What are your expenses? How many vacancies? This is how we come up with our values. Forms a list. What that is, we mail these out every year to all of the businesses. It's they have to fill it out. They're required to fill it out. It tells us what business equipment they have so that we get our personal property tax rolls correct. Inspections per taxpayer request. I get requests where people want me to come out and look at the house to make sure we have it correct, and for other reasons as well. And abatement applications. So we go out for all of those various reasons to properties. So this year, the valuation changes. And this is by class. It's the total class change over last year. And in some of these cases, it's based on appreciation and sales. In some cases, it's based on new houses being built or new solar fields being built or et cetera. So these are the valuation changes over last year. In general, the single family class is the total value is 7.2% more than it was last year. Condo 7.3, et cetera. It's out a little bit right here is apartments over 4 units. They went up a little bit less than 1%, but that's kind of a reaction to last year. Last year they went up about 14.5 or 15%, and there's fits and jerks in the market, sales and so forth. Land went down a little bit in value. So basically, overall, the residential class went up 6.2% in value. The commercial was pretty stable, and the industrial class went up 9.3% in value. Actually, a couple of things I want to note. So the industrial class is where the solar falls under. Big changes of land from back residential land to solar land increased the industrial class substantially. And there were a couple of properties that were reclassified from commercial to industrial that mitigated the increase in the commercial total, and it accelerated the industrial. So just wanted to point that out. So let's see. So during the public hearing, I had a couple of questions about how many ongoing sales and what does it mean, and I added this in just to give you an idea. So this is one of the state forms that we have to report to them, and they go through it and they approve it. So basically what this is telling you is that first column 101, that's single families, there are 2,730 properties. Of that, there were 188 sales, but of the 188, 103 were arm's length sales, which was 3.77% of all of single families. That's a lot. The state requires that you have at least 2%. This is a lot of sales. Our median ASR is 95%. ASR means the assessment to sales ratio. So if a household for $100,000, the assessed value would be 95. That's an ASR, and the median one is at 95%. Below that is COD, coefficient of dispersion. It's a statistical measure. I'm not going to get into it, but the state requires on the single families to be under 10%. 8.13 is very, very good. It means most of the sales centered on that 95 ASR. Next column is condos. There were 19 arm's length sales. Condos are at a 97 ASR and a 3.02%. They're right on. There's very little dispersion. 104 is the two families. We're at 93%. There were 21 arm's length sales. 105 is there were 10 arm's length sales. We're at 94%. 111 to 112 are apartment buildings. We're at 98%. And as you can see, there were 12 arm's length sales. So we're right on the money on them. 130, 132 is land sales. There were no vacant land sales, arm's length sales. 300s are commercial. There were 3 sales. We're at 97%, which is slightly higher than the column on the left, single families. So they're at a little bit higher amount that they're being valued at. And 400s are industrial. There were no industrial arm's length sales. So the tax levy, basically, it's determined by the total amount to be raised is determined by all the voted appropriations, budgets and so forth, and expenditures, and state and local county charges. It's paid for by state aid, local receipts, excise tax fees, etc., enterprise funds, free cash, stabilization, any transfers when they happen. The remainder is the tax levy. So for Southbridge, that amount is, for this year, $23,196,905. That's our tax levy. This number was given at the time we voted the budgets in May. In fact, it was slightly higher by about $2,000 to $3,000. Basically, when you have to finite the calculation of the tax rate based on value, that's why it went down a little bit. But this number was known and given at budget time. Tax rate levy and the tax rate. The 2021 tax levy, again, is $23,196,000. We've already discussed the town taxable value is $1,193,000,000. If you do the math on that and divide the levy by the town value, that yields this year's tax rate of $19.44 per $1,000 of assessed value. Comparison to last year. So this year, our tax levy is $23,196,000. Last year was $21,935,000. So that's an overall increase of $1,261,000, or 5.75%. If you subtract the new growth, which again is new business, new buildings, new single families, those solar farms, the solar equipment, and many, many other things, that's all new taxpayers. That's $445,000. The change after the new growth is $816,526, or 3.2%. So how does Prop 2.5 come into this? So basically, it establishes a levy ceiling, the levy limit, and maximum allowable levy, and an excess levy capacity, which I have to report to the state tomorrow when we go to set the tax rate. So the levy ceiling, the first part of Prop 2.5, it states that in any year, property taxes cannot exceed 2.5% of total assessed value. In other words, the tax rate can't be more than $25 per $1,000 valuation. For Southbridge, the value is $1,193,000 times 2.5%. So our levy ceiling is $29,831,000, which we are, clearly under by several $1 million. So the levy limit, maximum allowable levy. This is really the part of Prop 2.5 that people misunderstand sometimes, and very, very important. So what it basically says is you have your last year's levy limit, you can add 2.5% to that. You add your new growth, and that gives you, in this year's levy limit. To that, you can add any debt exclusions or overrides or and so forth. And that'll give you your 2021 maximum allowable levy. And again, for Southbridge, last year's levy limit was $22,400,000. The 2.5% increase is $560,000. A new growth was $445,000. That means our levy limit is $23,419. To that, we have a debt exclusion. If you recall, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the voters approved the debt exclusion to renovate and expand Bay Path High School in Charlton. But in any case, you add those all up, and that means our maximum allowable tax levy for this year is $23,635,621. We can't exceed that. So in the very top row, you see, second row, excuse me, for 21, you see our maximum allowable levy, $23,635,000, excuse me. To the right of that middle column, you have our this year's actual tax levy, $23,196,905. So that means we're $438,716 under our levy, maximum allowable levy. So if we had chosen to, if we needed to, we could have raised that much in additional revenue and still been under the constraints of Prop 2.5. We didn't, and that's money that we're not utilizing. It doesn't go away. That excess levy capacity is available for future years. So options. As we said before, the town has options. There's a residential exemption and there's a classification or splitting the tax rate. Residential exemption, a town can go up to a 35% discount of the average residential value to owner-occupied properties. If you do that, though, the tax rate increases for all residential properties because the whole residential class has to make up the same amount of money. What this does, it shifts the burden to lower valued homes, shifts the burden from lower valued homes to vacant land, higher priced home, and non-residential homes. Remember, all residential land is taxed at that higher rate. This works in communities with a large amount of vacation homes, non-owner occupied properties to shift the burden onto. I've said it before, the Board of Assessors strongly recommends against adoption of this exemption. So the value exemption that we're kind of talking about here, with a 10% 10% residential exemption, the value on that would be $18,321, which would be reduced from every owner-occupied property, and then that's multiplied by the higher tax rate, all the way up to if somehow we decided to do a 35% residential exemption, you'd reduce 64. You give a value credit of $64,127. But the tax rate would be much, much higher than it is. In fact, it would be much higher than the commercial tax rate. So just to give a little bit further, the residential tax rate with a single rate, no residential exemption is $19.44. With a 10% residential exemption, it would jump to $20.86. With a 20% residential exemption, the residential tax rate would jump from $19.44 to $22.51. With a 35% residential exemption, the tax rate would go from $19.44 on the residential to $25.53. So theoretically, if we granted a residential exemption and didn't split the tax rate, the residential tax rate could be $25.53, and the commercial, industrial, personal property tax rate could be $19.44. There's just a lot of inconsistencies with it, I guess. So this chart, this map right here, as I said, this is the state of Massachusetts. The communities here around Boston have the residential exemption in various degrees. And down here, you have Provincetown, Truro, I think it is Wellfleet. 11, you have Martha's Vineyard down here. And I think this is Barnstable. But they're the only ones. Because unless you have a strong influx of renters like in Boston and Somerville and Cambridge, students and all of that, or a lot of people who have second homes, it doesn't do any good. All it does is kind of flip the cards in some strange ways. So I think this map speaks for itself. This chart right here shows what would happen if we did a 10% residential exemption. So this first column, this column here shows what our property taxes would be if we don't do anything. We have a single tax rate. If a house is valued at this right here in yellow is the average single family value at a 1944 single tax rate, no residential exemption, that property tax is going to be $41.74. Okay. This middle section, if we had a 10% residential exemption, and these are what would happen if they're owner-occupied properties. So if you had the average single-family value of $214,000, the tax rate would be $20.86 for all residential properties, and that average person would save $77.26 a year. But as you go down, because that value exemption is less of a percentage of the higher valued properties, right around here at 260,000 to 270, it breaks even. You don't pay more, you don't pay less. If your house is valued any more than that, you're paying considerably more, $15.40 more, $29.43. And could have went on with this chart, but I mean, it would have just been so busy. The reason I put these other two down here is I just want to emphasize something. Actually, this one right here, this value of $3,609,000, that's TAG, or Lebanon Hill Housing, the senior housing. Now, they wouldn't get the exemption, so this wouldn't apply here, but I just wanted that line in there. And below that is Rosemead. It's our largest residential taxpayer. So what would happen to, right over here, for example, to TAG, they'd get no value exemption. The tax rate is 2086, not 1944, so that's higher. So TAG, our elderly complex, would be paying more money in property tax. In any apartment building, this same thing applies, but TAG is, specifically for seniors. And right here, this is Rosemead. They'd be paying about $24,000 more. But any of those apartment buildings, they'd be paying considerably more. So just a couple of things. The cons on this, it would take about a year to implement this, because every property we'd have to get applications in to find out if they're owner occupied and so forth. We couldn't do it now. There's not enough time to do it. It's one of those kind of things. I said it last year. If that's what you want to do, we need a lot of time to prepare for it. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out. We probably need extra help, because somebody's got to go into, about 4,000 people would be eligible. A little bit less is what I calculate. And in my opinion, the worst part about this, I think people will lose faith in the system, because to me, this is kind of a Ponzi thing. It's like, how do you know when somebody lives there? How do you know when they moved out and they still may be getting the exemption in future years? It's just I think it erodes trust in the system. Again, higher valued properties, taxes will increase. It's not needs based. If a senior has a nice house valued at $300,000, their property tax is going up, and we may have tried to reduce taxes for seniors. So I just don't think it works here. And so that's the residential factor. The next part is classification or shifting the tax rate. So basically, the council will adopt a factor between 1.0 and the minimum residential factor. One of your votes says this. The maximum shift is up to 50% to the CIP classes. If you do that, so 50%, that's 150% to the commercial, industrial, personal property. That MRF, which is the minimum residential factor, would be 0.863 and that's simply based on the math, because there are $3.5, as I said earlier, $3.5 to save each residential property $1. So the council could adopt any factor between 1.0 and the minimum residential factor here. A factor of 1.0 is each class would be taxed at the same rate. And I'm going to give some examples of shift of the various classes. So before I do that, this map here is Massachusetts again. The properties in green have a split tax rate. The properties that aren't colored are all a single tax rate, okay? And you can see, as you probably know, Southbridge is in here somewhere. I forget which one we are. So you look at that and you see things clustered in the middle, in the eastern part of the state, and a little bit in Springfield and a tiny bit in Worcester in the western part. But this map here imposes who does it or who can do it. So these are the major highways in the state. So here again, you have Boston, and you have Route 93 going through it, and you have Route 95 going around it and coming down here. Okay? Then you have 495 coming through here. And here you have 290. So this is 25 here. This is Worcester. This is Auburn. 395 going south. You have no community. So this is the middle part of the state right here. There are no communities other than Auburn and Worcester that do it. Over here, you have Springfield and Holyoke and Chicopee and so forth. And again, they have Route 91 going through it, and they have the Mass Pike going through it. So, you know, it's high tech and it's highway access, really the biggest factors. Also want to point out, formerly there were a few communities around us that did it. Webster had a split tax rate for years. And where's Webster? This is Webster. They finally, they worked for 20 years to, not 20 years, I think 2002 to 2019 to get back to a single tax rate. So each year, the residential class paid a huge amount more as they moved to a single tax rate, but they finally did it. Sturbridge here had a split tax rate until 2015. Fitchburg up here, I'm not sure which one they are, they had a split tax rate and they finally moved to a single tax rate in 2020. And what I'm told is they weren't competitive and they were having difficulty keeping and attracting business. That's the primary reason they did it. So let me think. So these are examples of a tax shift. So along the top up here, a factor of 1.0 would yield a tax rate of 1944 for residential and 1944 commercial, industrial, personal property. If we did a 10% shift, the tax rate would be 1891 for residential, 2138 for commercial. A 20% shift, 1837, 2833. A 30% shift, you can see the numbers. A 40% shift, 1731 to $27 would be a commercial tax rate. And a 50% shift, 1678 to $29. So this is what the tax rate would be on the percentage of the shift. Down here in yellow, you see with a single tax rate, the average single family tax bill will be $4,174.61. The average commercial tax bill will be $10,994. And the average industrial tax bill will be $11,965. And based on the 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, you see the impact to the average single family. So just for illustration, if we shift to the max 50%, the average residential will be $3,603. But to do that, to save that $571, the average commercial would go to $16,491, and that's like a $5,500 increase. And the same thing with a commercial, it would be approximately the same thing, about a $5,000 increase at the maximum. Give me a moment. There's a lot of reasons the Board of Assessors, we recommend a factor of 1, a single tax rate. But if you have questions on, I'll be glad to give them, but I just want to move through this a little if I can. So this is examples of actual tax bills with a single tax rate. So the average condo, the tax this year will be $1,933. It's a $133 increase. And primarily the reason for this is condos have been very, very hot. They've just been increasing in value more than other classes of property over the last couple of years, and they're picking up a bigger share of the overall tax levy. pretty similar to the single families. The average bill is going to be $4,174. Two and three families, $3,742. Land, $351. Apartment buildings, the average bill is $74.54. Again, their property taxes aren't going up this year, but as I said before, it's because of the value. Last year they went up. It was like they went up double digits last year. I don't recall the exact amount, but their values increased far more than anyone else's, so they picked up a larger share last year. The average commercial tax bill, $10,994. It's going up 2.43% in the average industrial, $11,965, excuse me. So classification factor, again, the board recommends a factor of 1.0, a single tax rate for all classes of property. Other factors, tax-wise, how do we compare? In the past, so this is how we compare statewide. And just to give an idea, Southbridge is down here. The average single family tax bill for the state is up here. I only show this because for many, many years, we've always been about 2/3 of the average. And it looks like we're still in that ballpark. So how do we compare? So this is how we compare to our neighbors. I used to talk about how we compare statewide. I don't think that's as relevant. These are our neighbors around us, as well as Ware, which is a similar city, a similar town. So I'm going to spend a minute with this because in every year I hear our tax rate is so high and we're the highest, one of the highest around and all of that. And we are high, no doubt, but other towns are similar. But really what it comes down to is the relationship between the tax rate and the average single family property value to your tax bill. So I'm just going to go through these. So Southbridge, our tax rate last year was $19.48. Our average value was $201,000 for average single family value. And that yielded a property tax of $39.25. So let's call them on the right. The state publishes these numbers, and I simply took it from the state and plugged them in. The average single family tax bill ranking statewide, 1 being the highest, which is horrible, 330 being the lowest would be fabulous. And so Southbridge ranked 260th. So 260th highest. So this is a good ranking, is my point. The lower, the better. I mean, the higher the number, better. That's further down you are. Sturbridge, their tax rate last year was $19.02, a little bit less than us, but their average value was $312,000. So if you do the math on that, their average single family tax bill was $59.51, which is about $2,000 more than us. Plus they have a CPA, and the individual property owners have to pay, not quite 3%, but they have a CPA. They pay in addition to this $59.51. So Sturbridge ranked 126th highest in the state. It's much more than Southbridge. Charlton last year $14.94, average value $283. So their tax bill $42.34. So what, about $300 more than the average bill in Southbridge, and so they rank higher than us. Again, the lower the value, the worse you are. Auburn, they have a split tax rate. Residential $17.98. Excuse me, 20. Yeah, residential $17.98, commercials $22. So the blended rate is somewhere in the middle here. It's hard to find. I couldn't find it, but it's probably in the $19 range. So their average value $278,000. Their average taxpayer is $5,001. Even though their tax rate is less than us, they pay over $1,100 more than we do, and they're ranked 182. Dudley, their tax rate $13.06. Their average value is a little higher, but the tax rate is really low. So their average tax bill $34.34, 301 in the state. So that's Dudley. They don't have the same level of services, but still, that's a nice number. Webster $15.06. Their average tax bill $4,239, 236th in the state. So what are they? About $300 more than us as well. And the town of Ware, it's another in Milltown industrial town. Their tax rate $20.63, higher. It's considerably higher than ours. Their average value is lower than ours, though. So it yields a tax bill of $39.45, $20 more than us. It's comparable. And in the rankings, they're one ahead of us. Well, ahead of us is not good. Better to be the lower of the number, the higher the number. So tax exemptions, having said all of that, there's still people who have trouble paying bills and need help. We offer the tax exemptions. We have a number of elderly and veterans and other people who apply for and are able to receive these. I encourage everybody who's got one in the past to please be sure to come back. You have 90 days after the tax bills are mailed, so usually March 31st. And even if you just have any questions, call us at this number or stop into the office, or any way we can, we'll help you and help you see if you qualify. And that's that. So, are there any questions? Is anyone still awake?
Any questions for Will? All right. Questions, Councilor Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of questions, and maybe I should have asked them earlier in the public hearing, but it didn't occur to me then.
Go ahead, Councilor Steve.
One of the things, during the course of your presentation, you mentioned that we haven't had any land sales. I've seen I've seen several properties on the market.
Go ahead, Councilor Steve.
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? My mic is on.
I can hear you fine now.
Okay, good. So during the presentation, Will, you mentioned that there have been no land sales this year. But I've seen several properties on the market for some time now, including one that happens to be down the street from me. Do you have any idea why they're not selling?
Yeah, yes, I do. Because the cost to develop a property is very, very high. It's more economical in Southbridge for somebody to take an existing property. There are some land sales, to be honest with you, but they're not valid arm's length sales. So okay. What do I mean by that? Up on Denison Hill, there were a couple of sales where two or more lots get sold together. There's just not a lot of where people will buy the land and then put another $300,000 into a house. They're either buying existing properties or they're buying in the developments like on Canoyer Boulevard or Harwood Farms or Wildberry Road, where you're buying everything together. Right. Where a developer already bought the land, put the water and sewer, and got it all done. And that's really the primary reason.
Okay. I was curious also, during the course of your conversation, you were talking about the residential exemption rate. Did I hear you properly say that you said around 2,000 homes would be eligible?
No, it's quite a bit more than that. I think it's about 3,700 homes would be eligible.
And I was just curious, you mentioned that it would take about a year or so to get going. I was thinking that if we were to do this, and I don't know if we will, but we could just set a deadline, an application deadline for that. And if people miss it and they think they qualify, they would seek an abatement through you guys, wouldn't they?
That is one way to do it. But if you really want to get all of them in ahead of time, because basically if you get them in ahead of time, you can calculate it into your tax rate. If you have people applying for an abatement on it, basically that hits the overlay, and that's a number that will increase the tax levy, because the abatements all have to be funded through the overlay. I've talked to assessors in some of the other towns and that have done this. In Truro, when they did it, they said make sure you get all the applications in place before you do it.
Okay. And earlier, I was curious also from an assessing point of view, how are commercial and industrial delineated? Is it beyond? Is there any way that you do it beyond the way they're zoned?
Yeah, it is beyond the way they're zoned. It's by use. So the state requires us to classify them by their use. So, and there are a lot of very, very specific uses. For example, bank building, office building, those are all commercial. It's very, very specific. Whereas a manufacturing, it's by different types of manufacturing facility. Manufacturing, which in the industrial class, it's just very specific to what they do. It's common. It's not common sense. It all kind of, when you do it, you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. That makes sense. They produce the product as opposed to selling the product, as opposed to renting, doctor's offices kind of thing. But it's all based on those land use codes, which the state requires.
Okay, so they basically kind of overlap the way you zone, but no, they're not identical to it.
The zoning really doesn't have to do with it. It's the use of the property. Zoning in the future will have more and more to do with it because now we're zoning correctly. In the past,
right.
But buildings, things are being built based on zoning. In the past, that wasn't the case.
Okay. And the last question I had is actually relevant to, I don't know if you saw this, but Karen sent us a document this afternoon about changes to this year's town budget of $436,331. And I want to know how much of an impact does that actually have on the tax rate? If I'm reading this properly, it's cutting $436,000 from it because of, and I think Karen was on the call earlier, so I don't know, maybe she'd be the best person to answer that question, but.
I don't believe it's cutting it. I believe it's reallocating. Some revenues have gone down. Some revenues have gone down. Health insurance went down, for example.
Yeah.
There's an item there that allowance for abatements and exemptions.
Right.
That's on the recap that we had estimated that to be $200,000. But the Board of Assessors has reduced what we're requesting on that because our abatements and exemptions are going to be a little bit, I'm not going to say going to be less. We have some money in overlay reserve to cover those. So it's reallocating some revenues and expenses some revenues, for example, that aren't going to come in as high, but some expenses that aren't going to be as much.
Okay, but it's not going to have any impact on the tax rate.
That's my take on it, and I'm not the expert on this, but that's my take.
Karen is here. So Karen, do you have anything else to elaborate on that?
The only effect that it's having on the tax levy is actually the tax levy rounding. The levy's going down by the 1,431. Otherwise, as Will is saying, our local receipts were reduced. The cherry sheet receipts are reduced. Cherry sheet assessments at the school choice and the charter school are reduced. And in order to get those to balance, there's going to be a vote to decrease the health insurance budget for FY 2021 due to the health insurance premium holiday. So that's really the only effect it has on the tax levy.
Okay, thanks, Karen. That's all I had for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Any other councilors have questions for Will? Any other councilors?
I do.
Go ahead, Council Marquetti.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Will, for putting on your presentation. Seems like we've gone through this many times over the years. And you probably know what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it again. Again, as with last year, I'm opposed to a single tax rate for all classes, and we'll vote no on your proposal. I've never been opposed to a fair, and I notice every time I start this, you want to bring that map up, which is fine. That's what you want to do. That's fine. I notice on your map there that Southbridge is very close to Route 84 and the Mass Pike and Route 20. So I don't think we're that far away from access to the marketplace. And I think that that's what businesses look for, access to the marketplace. They also look for a well-trained workforce. And I think with Quinn Sig coming into the Southbridge High School, I think we're going to have a well-trained workforce. I think when it comes to taxes, that's way down on the list on why a business comes into a community. I've never been opposed to a fair tax rate increase. I've always felt that increases should be even across the board based on the ability to pay. And as was the case last year, I proposed a 30% split tax rate with higher tax rates applied to commercial and industrial properties and lower tax rates applied to residential properties. And I'm standing by my proposal. The 30% shift in taxes would increase commercial and industrial property tax levies from 1944 to 25.27 per thousand. and reduce residential property tax levies from 1944 to 17.84 per thousand. Now, I know this year, due to the pandemic, commercial enterprises are struggling, but so are the residents. And this council passed several measures to try and help commercial businesses. We handed out tax breaks, TIFs. We waived building permit fees. We recently waived liquor licensing fees. There's a $250,000 micro enterprise grant made available to small businesses, and a COVID-19 emergency economic development program, which offers low interest loans to businesses. We've taken all these steps to help businesses, yet it hasn't resulted in higher employment. Instead, unemployment has increased in Southbridge. The unemployment rate in Southbridge stands at 9.1%. I took a look at the unemployment rate for the communities on your list. They're all lower than Southbridge. Sturbridge is at 5.9%. Charlton's at 4.8%. They're all lower than Southbridge. Or it could be that the businesses in this town are not employing Southbridge residents. I really don't know. Last year, I was told a split tax rate would hurt mom and pop operations. The average commercial property value on your chart here is $565,543. Small mom and pop businesses are not that high, and I don't think a split tax rate would significantly hurt the smaller businesses. Like I said, we voted to help small businesses with tax breaks, fee waivers, grants, and low interest loans. Some of the larger commercial enterprises are not hurting, in my opinion. If anybody has gone to the grocery store shopping lately, which my wife does most of the shopping for in our family, she tells me that the stores are very busy and the prices have increased dramatically. Now, I know Southbridge faces some really heavy fiscal issues. We need a new fire station. We have to figure out how we're going to pay for our curbside collection. And the roads need significant repair. But I think it's time that we set ourselves up to face those issues. We need a tax system that is fair across the board, that the residents will support. A split tax system is the only way that I know of to achieve fairness and generate the revenue we needed. I'm not opposed to a tax increase. I want it to be fair. And every year for the last 10 to 20 years that I've been watching this, it's always more of a burden on the residential one family, and the commercial and industrial always pay a lower percentage increase. So if someone can come up with a fair tax system that will generate the revenue that we need, rather than a split tax, I'm willing to listen. But otherwise, I think the way to generate the revenue and assure a fair tax base, it needs to be based on the ability to pay. And a split tax rate is the only way that that's going to be achieved. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Anybody? Go ahead, Council Ryan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. I'm going to start off by saying I support sticking with the single tax rate, and I'm glad Will brought up the town of Sturbridge. I lived in Sturbridge during that time in which they had the split rate, and many of the same arguments that were made by the previous speaker, Councilor Marchetti, were the same arguments that were made by the Board of Selectmen at the time. And what ended up happening is it hit new growth. It negatively impacted the community, and the community quickly switched back to having a single rate over the next. They went back to and staggered it over 5 years to get it back to the single rate because it hit new growth. And Southbridge has a lot of vacant property, commercial property and industrial property, and we're already having a hard enough time keeping and attracting businesses to the community. This is just not something that's going to be economically sustainable for the community if we start down this trend. I understand the previous speaker's points, and I yearn for also a fair tax system. But at the same time, the reality in front of us is this is going with a split rate is not the solution to Southbridge's problem. It's incentivizing and attracting businesses to the community that will help solve part of the problem. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors have questions for Will? Any other comments? Any other comments? Seeing none? Thank you, Will. I'm sure we'll have questions. Somebody has a question on the next one, so hang in there. Item 9, vote to establish a tax classification factor of 1.0 for tax purposes. The Board of Assessors recommends a yes vote for 8
So moved.
HS single tax rate. Motion by Council Ryan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion?
Counselor
Go.
Gopian?
Mr. Canoy, go ahead.
I just want to say, I just noticed that H8S, that's a,
Yeah, what
that's
is-
a typo. That's a typo
Yeah.
one.
What is it supposed to be?
Board of Assessors just recommends a yes vote for a single tax rate. I don't know where that H8HS came from.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Steves, did you have? Go ahead.
Actually, yes, I did. Thank you. I was actually hoping other people have more questions for Will, and then Mike jumped in and said actually several of the things that I wanted to say. So thank you, Mike, for bringing this up. I know you brought it up last year, and you actually probably said it more eloquently than I did today. But I was thinking that looking at the tax rates, the way you split them, the residential 9.9178 factor, the 30% split, is where it starts getting to the point where the average residential household pays less in taxes this year than they did last year. So I would move that we actually make that as our tax rate. The tax split is 0.9178 rather than 1.0.
Any other discussion?
I'm making
Any
that as a
other
motion.
discussion? You have a motion.
I second the motion.
So it's a motion to amend
Yes.
to make it a 0.9178.
Yes.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion on that? Any other discussion on that? Okay, there's a motion to amend to vote to establish a tax classification factor and change it to 0.9178 for tax purposes. This would go against the Board of Assessors recommendation of a yes vote. Take a roll call on the amendment.
Counselor Adams,
No.
Counselor Catrona,
Yes.
Counselor Daniel,
No.
Counselor Dow,
No.
Counselor Jovan,
No.
Counselor Lazo,
No.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
No.
and Counselor Steves.
Yes.
I believe that's a 6-3. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Motion fails. So back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Any further discussion on the main motion? One more time. Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Catrona, Counselor Catrona,
No.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
Counselor Dow,
Yes.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
No.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
No.
and Counselor Adams.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-3. Item 10, vote to adopt a varied classification of property for tax purposes, including open space discount and residential exemption. Board of Assessors recommends a no vote. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Daniel,
No.
Counselor Dow,
No.
Counselor Jovan,
No.
Counselor Lazo,
No.
Counselor Marquetti,
No.
Counselor Ryan,
No.
Counselor Steves,
No.
Counselor Adams,
No.
and Counselor Catrona.
No.
Motion does not carry. Item 11. Somebody have a question? Okay. Item 11, vote to adopt a single tax rate for all classes of property. The Board of Assessors recommends a yes vote. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We're going to motion by Council Ryan, second by Council Lazo. Any discussion on this? Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Dow, Counselor Dow,
Council Dow?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
No.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
No.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
Counselor Catrona,
No.
and Counselor Daniel.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-3. Item 12, vote to reduce the fiscal year 2021 appropriation for account number 001911.517200, group insurance town by $51,600, and account number 001911.517200.0300, group insurance school by $77,400, for a total reduction of $129,000 due to the health insurance premium holiday. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion by Council Lazo, second by Council Daniel. Discussion? Any discussion on this? Any discussion? Council Steves?
Just a quick question through you to Karen. I know I kind of brought that kind of what came up in her document that she sent to us, but can you just explain a little bit of this, why we're doing this and where this health insurance premium holiday came into being?
Finance Director?
I'm actually going to, if Melissa, are you on? I would like to defer to you if I could, because I know you know a little bit more specifics in the details.
Okay, Melissa is on. Melissa?
Sure. So the health insurance premium holiday came to us in late May of this year, shortly after the COVID. Our insurance carrier, Maya, the insurance troop Gus, offered a 50% holiday on the health insurance premium for all of its members. So we're a member of the Maya Trust. That's where we get our health insurance. And so what that meant is that our employees received 50% on the portion that they pay, which is 40%, and we've received 60% on the portion that we pay. So for instance, if my health insurance costs the town $1,000 a month, the town saves $600 that they would have paid for me, and then or $300 that they would have paid for me, and $200 I personally would have saved if I was paying. So we gave a premium holiday to all of the employees, and so they did not make a payment the first payroll of the fiscal of the first payroll of June, which pays for their July premium. And then when we received the bill was 50% of its normal monthly cost. So I did a calculation back in May, who was enrolled in our plan, what they, what we would pay for each individual health insurance and how the split would be. And so we were able to use this savings. The insurance companies gave this both as something to help our membership, and our employees, a way to give back because they were doing well. And also because they knew that the communities would be struggling with revenue. So Karen talked about how she had to reduce some of our local receipts. As you know, you asked me in the spring to not send out demands, to waive interest up to a certain point. So we lost that revenue. So this is how we are able to balance the lack of that income coming in with an expenditure going out because our partnership with Maya allowed us to have this savings, and it has already been realized.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Melissa? Council Marquetti? I'm sorry, your camera isn't showing as active, so I didn't see you. Did you have a question?
No, Counselor Steves asked the question. It was fine.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
Counselor Catrona,
Yes.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
and Counselor Dow.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Second.
Been a motion and a second, roll call.
Counselor Lazo,
Yeah.
Counselor Marquetti,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
Counselor Catrona,
Yes.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
Counselor Dow,
Yes.
and Counselor Jovan.
Yes. Thank you and have a good evening.
Night all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night.
Thank you.